International trade or global trade is an exchange of capital, goods, and services between different countries and territories. In year 2018, the global trade value of goods exported throughout the world amounted to approximately 19.5 trillion US dollars. In comparison, this figure stood at around 6.45 trillion US dollars in year 2000. The rise in the value of goods exported around the world reflects developments in international trade, globalization, and advances in technology. The factors that affect international trade include endowments and productivity, trade policy, exchange rates, foreign currency reserves, inflation, and demand. Next, a little exposure of trade war between the USA and China. The China-United States trade war is an ongoing economic conflict between China and the United States. Ex-President Donald Trump in year 2018 began setting tariffs and other trade barriers on China with the goal of forcing it to make changes to what the US says are unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. The trade war has negatively impacted the economies of both the United States and China. In the United States, it has led to higher prices for consumers and financial difficulties for farmers. Meanwhile, in China, the trade war contributed to a slowdown in the rate of economic and industrial output growth, which had already been on a decline. Top 3 countries as worldwide importers in year 2018. First country is USA with a total imported of 2.8 trillion US dollars. Followed by China with a total of 1.7 trillion US dollars, then Germany with a total of 1.2 trillion US dollars. Meanwhile, top 3 countries as worldwide exporters in year 2018, the leading country is China with a total exported of 2.5 trillion US dollars, followed by USA with a total of 1.6 trillion US dollars, then Germany with a total of 1.5 trillion US dollars.
The first reason is because of the differences in technology. Advantageous trade can occur between countries if the countries differ in their technological abilities to produce goods and services. Secondly is because of the differences in resource endowment. Resource endowments refer to the skills and abilities of a country's workforce, the natural resources available within its borders, and the sophistication of its capital stock. Thirdly, countries trade because of the differences in demand. Individuals in different countries may have different preferences or demands for various products. Lastly, the existence of economies of scale in production. The existence of economies of scale in production is sufficient to generate advantageous trade between two countries. Economies of scale refer to a production process in which production costs fall as the scale of production rises.
Strategies for countries to boost their net exports and step up to international trade. Devaluing currency. Devaluing currency is making one's country's currency low relatively to another. So what is the effect of devaluing currency to the export? A more valuable currency makes export price relatively more expensive for purchase in foreign market. When the currency is low, it will also make the export price low in the foreign market. Exporters will become more competitive in global market, thus exports are encouraged while imports are discouraged. Countries who devalue their currency is Japan and China. Certain countries aims to have balanced trade. However, in achieving this goal, it needs more effort than how easy it may sound like. So how countries ensure a regular flow of international trade? It is by having a trade agreement. Trade agreement is an agreement between two or more countries for a better flow of international trade. It is aimed at stimulating trade and supporting economic growth for countries involved. For example, US made trade agreements with Japan in which Japan agrees to buy a certain amount of American-made automobiles in exchange for the US increasing its imports on Japanese rice. There are also many ways for countries to maintain their international trade. For example, having a low interest rate and applying trade barriers.
GATT is a general agreement on tariff and trade. It was the first multilateral free trade agreement. It is to eliminate tariffs and also increase international trade. GATT was signed in Geneva on 1947 and it was an agreement between 23 countries. The objectives of GATT is to raise the standards of living and the progressive development of the economies of all contracting parties. Second, it is to eliminate harmful trade protectionism. This is because trade protectionism is likely contributed to 66% reduction of global trade during the Great Depression. Lastly, it was to boost the economic recovery after World War II through reconstructing and revitalizing global trade. World Trade Organization, called WTO, is a global international organization that deals with the rules of trade between nations. It is to help the producers of goods and services conduct their business. WTO replaced GATT in year 1995 in Geneva. The objectives of WTO is to set and enforce rules for international trade. Second is to provide a forum for negotiating and monitoring further trade liberalization, and is to increase the transparency of decision-making processes. The last objective of WTO is to cooperate with other major international economic institutions and also to resolve all of the trade disputes between nations.
World merchandise trade volume decreased by 2% in the first quarter of 2020 over the previous quarter in seasonal adjusted terms. Lockdown measures across the globe to fight the spread of COVID-19 took a toll on global demand, production and trade. In value terms, world exports and imports decreased about 6.2% and 5.3% in year-on-year terms. All regions registered declines in 2020 Q1. World merchandise trade volume decreased by 14.3% in the second quarter of 2020. Economies across the globe implemented strict lockdown measures throughout the period to combat the spread of COVID-19, which led to the sharp decline in trade volume. World merchandise trade volume increased by 11.6% in the third quarter of 2020 over the previous quarter in seasonally adjusted terms. This growth was supported by fiscal and monetary interventions, business adaptation, and the relaxation of lockdown measures. Although the trade decline during the COVID-19 pandemic is similar in magnitude to the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, the economic context is very different. The contraction in GDP has been much stronger in the current recession, while the fall in trade has been more moderate. As a result, the volume of world merchandise trade is only expected to decline around twice as much as world GDP at market exchange rates, rather than 6 times as much during the 2009 collapse. Tourism was particularly hard hit in the second quarter of 2020, with international travelers' expenditure down 81% and transport down 31%. The drop in transport matches declines recorded during the financial crisis, which is negative 29%, but the underlying reasons are different and are linked to restrictions to passenger transport and a fall in global demand for international travel.
Today's global pandemic, COVID-19, opens up various opportunities for the medical and health industry around the world. Firstly is the face mask. In May 2020, China exported more face masks than any product. It is a few billions more than China's best monthly exports on its traditionally strongest products, which are laptop and cell phone. Secondly is the medical latex hand glove. According to the Malaysian Rubber Glove Association, Malaysia could export as high as 240 billion of glove pieces in 2020. There are a surge of demand from the healthcare workers and even the police in the US and Europe. Thirdly is the vaccine. The vaccine for COVID-19 is widely purchased around the world to treat the COVID-19. The demand and supply will escalate very quickly soon when the effectiveness of the vaccine is highly proven. There are also challenges that international traders have to face during this COVID-19 pandemic. As countries are experiencing lockdown, the borders are closed, hence making international trading progress slower. Other trading products such as garment exports, for instance, apparel and footwear exports from China, declined very sharply. This is because during this pandemic, people prioritize the essential goods such as food and medicines more.